All good in the hood as we live stream. There we are. We're onto it with Brodie Kane. Kia ora, Brodie.
Kia ora, Pat. How are you?
I'm doing bloody marvellous. Thanks for asking. And yourself?
I'm fantastic. It's Friday, so Friday's always a great day. It's a beautiful day here in Ototahi, Christchurch. Got a nice sort of low-key weekend planned, so all is well, actually.
And I'm sure, I think most of us first probably saw you doing sports news on TVNZ. I'm sure you're all about the game this weekend. You're going to be down for the North-South?
Yeah, well, because do you know the funny thing is, because remember, obviously, it was supposed to be last weekend, wasn't it? And then
In
obviously,
Auckland,
COVID. So I'd actually I wasn't aware that it was when it had been put to, and someone said to me, "Oh, you're going to watch it tomorrow night?" I was like, "Oh, it's tomorrow night." So absolutely, we'll. I think it's at 7:10 or something, which is like okay, but I'll be in for that, and you know that I'll be south. So, yeah, it'd be good to watch that, have a couple of gins.
Is that who you are? Are you a Christchurch girl through and through? Is this where the Brodester was raised and born and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, so born in Christchurch, raised in Christchurch. I left and lived, I have lived a fair bit in Auckland. I moved up when I was 21 and spent sort of about 8-ish years over a 10-year period up there and loved it, but yeah, I'm a proud Cantab, and you know how some people roll their eyes at that, but we're very proud people.
Yeah, no. And when you came back from Auckland, the friends and family, they welcomed you back. You didn't have to go through some kind of ceremony first to kind of get that Auckland off you?
Well, it is quite funny because it's funny that you said it because I remember not long after the very first time that I moved up there, the first time I came back down just to, catch up with everyone. My auntie said to me, "Oh, look at we were out walking or something," and she said to me, "Oh, that looks very Ponsonby Road, what you're wearing." And I was like, "I didn't buy any of this in Auckland. This is all from Christchurch. You've completely, created this whole scenario of the fact that I all of a sudden now look like an Aucklander." So that kind of stuff has always happened. And I think that even by my own admission, Auckland, especially the climate, is so much different. So anytime that I've come down to Christchurch and you tackle your first Christchurch winter again, you realise how much of a sook you became living in Auckland. It's like, oh my God, it's so cold.
Yeah, my father's constantly telling me that he lives in a sort of retirement complex he looks after himself. It's not a retirement village, but it's like an apartment building, and he's like, "Oh, yep, no, we put on the heat pump for the first time today. It's like June the 12th, and I'm like, I'm on my 3rd cubic meter of firewood, and I get it because we're down in Dunedin, obviously, for people who are just tuning in. So yeah, so much like yourself, although well, it is colder, but it's also, I don't know if it is cold. Oh, it is colder, but it's also less windy. I mean, you guys.
It's kind of. We get the colder mornings, so we get those frosts, but then your days can be colder. Yeah.
No, look, I'm born and bred, 40 years out of Auckland, and then moved to Dunedin. So I'm sort of the opposite of you, but I'll be voting for the South as well this weekend. I probably actually don't give a shit about either team. I just want to watch a good game of footy, to be honest.
It's kind of a shame that no one will be there either, because it would have just sort of enhanced that such a unique game as well. That is a real bummer, but I'm sort of like you. Of course I'll go for South, but I'm just pleased to see some live sport. So bring it on, 7:10.
I got a mate spent a lot of time playing and watching basketball in the 1990s. Like I played a lot of basketball. My body's feeling it now from those years ago, and of course that was the golden age of NBA with Jordan coming through and kind of taking the game to the world on a bigger scale. I was talking to a mate of mine just a couple of days ago who there was a crew of us that did all these things and played and watched it together, and we both agreed that we don't really have a team in the NBA anymore, and actually it's more enjoyable to watch. Because, you have the odd thing here and there that you want this person. Like, I want Kawhi to do well this year. I want, there'd be something quite cool about LeBron winning this year to kind of solidify his greatness. But actually, I don't have a team, so I just watch the NBA now to watch good basketball. And it actually makes it, for me, more enjoyable and less stressful, for want of a better word.
Yeah, I guess, I know that firsthand with being a Warriors supporter, how hard that can be when you do have a team and maybe they're not doing so well. But on the basketball, I mean, I would openly admit that I'm not a huge basketball watcher. I appreciate sports people that do anything. But when I watched that Michael Jordan doco, I was hooked. I couldn't stop watching that. That was so fascinating. And they are such remarkable sports people put under so much pressure. It was really, really interesting, and it sort of gave me a whole new appreciation for the sport, much like the Formula One. Did you watch the Formula One doco?
I haven't watched it yet, but it is in my to-watch list.
Yeah, it's so good. Mum and I watched it actually during lockdown 1.0, and we were both hooked. About it just sort of draws you in because I think we love what's so good about some of these docos that are coming out these days is it's such unprecedented access and they're so well put together, and you just haven't. I mean, I'm not saying docos haven't always been great, but if I talk about those two in particular, they're just incredible.
The thing I like most about it, and I was going to show you something here. This is not a brag thing here, but I'll show you one of my Instagram posts from a couple of years ago. Hang on, if I push this. So these are remnants. I don't know if you can see up close, even though you're not a basketball supporter necessarily. This is like 45 Shaquille O'Neal rookie cards from 1990, 1991, and 1992. All still in their,
Wow.
all still in their plastic, basically taken out of the containers and mint as. That's the kind of basketball nut I was back in the 1990s. So I consumed, there's some Jordans in there as well, I think, but primarily it was when Shaquille was a rookie, and that one there is a college card. There's a draft card down here which is autographed with him and Penny Hardaway. So I was a nut.
You still have all of those?
Yeah.
You still have them?
Yeah, and all like that. They're all wrapped. Well, you're going to say they're worth a lot.
Sorry to go there, but would they be worth a bit?
Not like. So obviously the most expensive stuff is the older stuff. When Jordan came out, his rookie card, one of his rookie cards sold, I think this year for $100,000. That's from 86, I think. These ones are from about 91. And what happened at the late 80s, early 90s is there was a revival of basketball cards. And even here in New Zealand, there was there was card shops on Queen Street in Auckland and in Manukau City and that sort of thing. So I think because there was an explosion of basketball cards and of football cards, but basketball was the leading ones, they made them tenfold. So something that's now 30 years old or 28 years old, if in 1990 something that was 28 years old would be worth a lot of money today. But today something that's worth, I mean, there might be $2,000 to $4,000 worth of cards there altogether. So they're worth something, but nothing like sort of 86 and before. Because there's so much fewer of them, they're exponentially more expensive. So yeah, the answer is yes, something, but nothing like, I mean, it's not a jackpot. There's not a lotto win in that lot. But what I was going to say is that's the kind of nut I was. So the thing I enjoyed about The Last Dance was I was the kind of teenage kid who bought Michael Jordan VCR tapes. So I had a whole bunch of he had like a half dozen VCR tapes out. And you could buy them, and they were like a cross between documentary and sort of film, and highlight packages and all sorts of things. I had all of those. So I've painted how sad I am. The point I was going to make, though, there was so much footage in that documentary series that I had never seen. And I'm not saying I am the bastion of everything, but I consumed everything in the 90s. And, 50% of the footage that was in that I still hadn't seen. So that just goes to show, to your point, how unprecedented the actual access was.
Yeah, it was just great. It was just a great watch. And I love I think we're seeing more of it as well, into the minds of some of the best athletes in the world. And it's, a lot of them are, people go, they're difficult and divas and all that. And it's like, well, you can actually see why, because they're literally striving to be the best in the world. And to be the best in the world, you have to be on a completely whole nother level to go there. So I think it's good for people to see what kind of level you have to get to.
Yeah, I think that me and my friend Paul, who I was talking with the other day about basketball, we both agreed that we were more impressed with seeing and learning more about Jordan as a competitor, but we were less impressed with wanting to be his mate. Like he came across as someone, I don't want to be his mate, but I'm even, because he, you know, because that competitive nature goes to the nth degree, it would be exhausting to be friends with him. But when you see that in the form of a play, it even more impressed us. And guys are coming out now and complaining like Horace Grant and Bill Cartwright and stuff. And the reality is, if Michael wasn't there, they wouldn't have any rings to complain about. So, you know, take your lumps and enjoy the fame of being a 3 or 6 time champion, depending how long you were there for.
Exactly.
So
it was very good.
I talked to Polly Gillespie yesterday. It's funny that we have a couple of former The Hits breakfast hosts on in a row. But the old COVID, you were... I was going to ask, why did you leave TVNZ? I've been thinking about that of recent times. It seems that the public coffers, TVNZ, Radio New Zealand, those places, that must be a dream today. Now, you didn't leave today. You left previously, but with COVID coming through and wiping out so many media positions, working for a government media entity must be what everyone would love to do at the moment, because they must be the most secure jobs. Why did you leave TVNZ?
Well, at the time, I was approached to, you know, explore some other opportunities. And I just actually have always, I started my career in radio, and I've always had a massive soft spot for radio. And I felt that I was in a position in my career, and it was a tricky kind of area that I had grappled with for a couple of years or so, where, you know, I was kind of stepping away from hard news and you know, like serious journalism, and I was sort of kept on creeping into that realm of personality-based stuff. And so, you know, being offered a breakfast radio gig seemed like a great way to expand that. Yeah. And I always thought, if you know, a dream gig is a show, a breakfast radio show. And you know, it was down at home in Christchurch, and it was with a great guy, Dave Fitzgerald, who is, you know, highly regarded in the industry. And the job, and it was a show that was an underdog massively in terms of ratings and stuff like that. So it seemed like a really good challenge. Like, maybe, you know, when people go to you, oh, is it a step up or is it a step sideways? I sort of don't like to define those things. It's like, it's just what I need to do in the now. And so I weighed it up and it was like, yeah, let's do it. Let's get back down there and give it a crack. And so that was sort of the main reason, just to take a risk and see how it went.
Is it something that I've you know, I did 20 years plus of radio, got out, well, did I get out of it? I left some jobs by choice, and other jobs kind of floated away from me, trying to reach them and couldn't quite get them. But I've always thought if I was to ever get back into it, not that necessarily I'm saying there's offers out there or anything, I'd want some kind of assurances, because it's such a finicky industry. Like, they can just, I mean, I was working for it was Classic Hits at the time, Classic Hits and ZB, and a station called Viva in Auckland in 2008 when the first crash came through, and you know, the global financial crisis. And I saw quite quickly how fickle it is. People, you know, all of a sudden there was, I mean, I'm just making up numbers here, but as an example, there might have been, you know, 6 breakfast shows in the bottom half of the North Island that turned into 1 or 2 coming out of Wellington, sort of thing. And that was kind of the wake up call for me to kind of go, you need to have a side hustle here. You need to have other stuff going on, because it's a fickle industry that you can't really rely on all the time. When you went into your negotiations, not to know the personal details, but what kind of assurances did you want or were given for, you know, we're not going to turn this off in 6 weeks' time? Because it can happen.
Well, I think you know, you're acutely aware that you have a use by date. And sometimes you might not know when that is, but the listener might decide that, or the company goes in a different direction. So I think that's something that you have to go into it knowing, and it's brutal. Like, you guys might be the best radio show out there, but if no one's listening to it, then it doesn't matter if you think you're the best radio show. So you go into it and going, I have to give this everything, and I will give this everything. And if it doesn't work out for whatever reason beyond my control, I can walk away with my head held high. And I did do that this year. When that happened, I left everything on the floor. I couldn't have given it any more. And Fitzy couldn't have either. So we went, you know what? It wasn't bittersweet, because it was like, okay, well, we threw everything at it. It's not part of the plan right now, and that has to be. So I think if you do that, I think, interestingly enough, I don't know if cynical is quite the right word, maybe it is, but I remember like starting on 7 Sharp when 7 Sharp started.
Right.
And learning, you know, and being in a position where what 7 Sharp was trying to do was a new, well, you know, a different kind of format. So you'd had a very serious current affairs show at 7 o'clock. And then, you know, we're always a bit adept to change. And then big change came. And so, you know, it went down like a cup of cold sick for a lot of the public, and also, you know, media commentators. And all of a sudden, everyone, even in the media, had an opinion on it. But you were learning, so you saw all of that, and everyone would share all of that. But you could also see the reality of what they were trying to achieve. And essentially what they were trying to do is be aware that not everyone is sitting at home for 90 minutes wanting to watch serious television. So they were trying to change with the times. And I have full respect for people that are wanting to change with different audiences and, you know, appeal to different people. So I could see that side of things as well, which is, I think because I was still, you know, that was 2013. So I was still relatively young then, and I think it gave me a good perspective on going, okay, you've kind of got to move with things. And I don't think everyone does that, but it gave me a good, I guess, indication that, you know, you are good for this, and then maybe not next week, you're not the right person, or things constantly have to sort of keep moving and changing. And so I sort of learned that pretty early on.
It's an interesting thing that you're saying. It almost sounds like you need to be flexible and malleable to fit in with where media is going, because I'm not suggesting that that's the wrong place to be, but I think also the equal and opposite is true. You know, people who come in and who are disruptors, like who do the opposite, can also find success as well. Maybe I was going to say,
well, usually men, Pat. Usually men.
Do you think that's true? Do you think that women are harder to be disruptors than men?
Yep.
That's interesting. Why? Tell me about that. Expand on that for me.
Well, you give me a female disruptor versus male disruptor in the media.
Well, give me any disruptor to start off with. I mean,
well, if we're talking provocative, if we're talking Mike Hosking, Paul Henry, Duncan Garner.
No, sorry, Mike Hosking's
Sean Plunkett.
No, they're not. I don't believe they're disruptors. In fact, I was
not disruptors.
No, I was following. You know, when I finished up my tenure at ZB, I was talking to Radio and Live and stuff at the time, and I got told very clearly by the bosses there, we believe conservative talk is the next 10 years of talk. They're not disruptors. They're actually fitting into that narrative. And to be honest with you,
right. And
this is the comment that'll probably stop me ever working for ZB again, I don't think Mike Hoskins has done very much with his career other than jump on other people's coattails. I mean, yes, he started Breakfast. Credit where due. Then he followed on from Holmes and the 7 o'clock show and got big ratings that were built by Holmes. He followed on from Holmes and ZB and continued the ratings, because I give credit that he hasn't killed an audience, but he's sitting there on other people's audiences. He is making them his own. I mean, give credit, but he hasn't come in and changed everything. I mean, I think of a disruptor as someone who changes the focus and changes the way things are done and moves in a new direction. That's not those guys you've just listed. They've continued on, right. in my opinion.
Well, no, I guess I guess where I was going with that is that there are a lot more men in those positions and with a lot more to say, whereas where are the strong women? I was going to say, the irony was, I was going to say, where are the strong, stroppy women? And the bullshit thing about that is that it's like, well, we don't call the men stroppy, but when the women are feisty and that, it's like, oh, whoa. But, you know, I mean, you've got probably the wrong word is disruptor. You know, you've got wonderful people like Catherine Ryan and Kim Hill,
definitely,
you know, on Radio New Zealand, but
Yeah.
not a lot of people, not a lot of like, I guess, not news hounds would listen to that, or a younger sort of generation would know these wonderful women, because they're not, you know, I guess what I'm trying to say is that they're not on your telly or your, you know,
do you know though,
mainstream radio.
Do you know though, that's one of the things that excites me about what you're up to at the moment, as I bring up the Girls Uninterrupted on the screen for those of us who are watching, is that you have to remember, and I have to remember this because I'm caught in this thing as well, is that mainstream media is boring and tame. It's not likely the place you're going to find these people. Not that just because I was talking to her yesterday, but I think about Polly Gillespie as a broadcaster, and she certainly stuck to it with the quote unquote big boys, and she certainly had a different style than most, you know, female broadcasters out there, and she did it for a long time. And she's just announced yesterday that she's got a new radio show coming up, and she seems like, I think she said this on air yesterday as opposed to privately to me, that she's got full control. So she is able to do what she wants and where she wants. And you might find that she might be someone who's coming back into the mainstream marketplace as this person you were describing. But what the point being is, I don't think mainstream market is set up necessarily for these people. And I think things like podcasts and now independent broadcasts, and that's the place that they can come to. And that's the place you were talking about, younger people, that younger people actually flood to find them anyway.
Yeah, and don't get me wrong. You know, there are some wonderful and very, very strong women within the mainstream media. Like, there's some great women that are broadcasters. I think, as you say, you know, there are sort of particular sort of rules and stuff. And the reality is, there still are more men in those roles.
Oh, completely.
Like, it's just reality. So,
I guess by virtue of numbers, you're right, because if there's 50 men and 5 women in those kinds of positions, then you're going to find the person who is the maverick or the outside the box is likely more statistical to be a man anyway, because purely based on the numbers. Look, I mean, not to kind of talk about what we're doing here, but one of the reasons my whole podcast started up was an exact as a reaction against what the mainstream media is doing. I remember it like it was yesterday, watching TVNZ, watching a news item, and they had a 7-second video clip that accompanied that news item. It was on tvnz.co.nz. And it felt like they were saying to me, there, all you can do at the moment is handle a 7-second video clip. Where our research has been done, and it says the shorter the video clip, the better for click-throughs and stuff. And I'm just like, fuck off. I want more than a 7-second video clip. I want to look at these topics or issues or conversations, and I want to be able to sit with them and go, well, what about? Just look at my phone this morning. Holy crap, I was talking to a mate of mine up the hill. We wrote a novel talking about a subject matter, just going further into it, and what do you think, what do I think? And so what I've tried to actually do is almost the opposite of that, because I think it feels like I want to respect someone to go into the conversation fully and wholly and say, and then what? That's what I used to do on Talkback all the time, and say, and then what? What next? What's the downstream effect? And then what? And that's what we're trying to do. So I hate that kind of following along with being malleable a little bit. Maybe it's my rebellious Irish nature coming out. Maybe, I don't know.
It's I think the really exciting thing is that the way that people are accessing their media, whatever it is, whether it's news or, you know, whether it's Netflix, whether it's podcasts, you know, there's so many options for people. And so there's a lot more freedom there, and people have more choice. And I don't think that's a bad thing. And I just think it just enhances people that want to be involved in that. You know, you're allowed to have a lot more creativity and control over what you're doing. And I still think that's really, really important to adhere to your, you know, the ethics and laws that are put in place for very good reasons. But, you know, it's so good that there are so many other ways that you can delve into stuff. Like you could probably find a podcast on, you know, the study of the blowfly if you wanted to, or, you know, anything. You know, it's so good how much is out there for people. to access in different ways. It's not just traditional forms of media.
Well, and saying that, tell us about your. This was a product that you were doing with the Hits called Girls on Top. Was that right?
So we started Girls on Top when I was working at NZME, and then when I left, we relaunched so that it was ours. And now it's called the Girls Uninterrupted. So we started it.
Is that because NZME had some ownership? Like they had.
We just wanted to own it, which meant that we relaunched it.
Right. Okay. Same people, same format, sort of thing. Different name.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. And so we relaunched right in the middle of lockdown. And what is quite interesting about this podcast is it started as well. We actually originally started the podcast. It was called the Heartbreakers because we were to review. I'd always wanted to do a podcast, and then someone sort of threw us together to review the Heartbreak Island. Can you remember that show, Heartbreak Island?
Oh God, I'm not good with reality TV.
One of those shows. Anyway, and so we started doing that, and what became apparent is that the more entertaining stuff was actually just when we were giggling about silly other things. And so at the end of it, I said to Gracie and Caitlin, should we keep going? Should we do our own podcast? And so we sort of almost said, like, we're just going to do this. And they were sort of like, well, we don't really know if we can resource it. And we said, leave it with us. Can we just chip away? And so we did. We just chipped away, recorded every week. And it just started as three women sitting around just talking about ourselves really in a really sort of normal, like our lives essentially.
Yeah.
And then, which has now in quite an overwhelming but in very sort of humbling way become a real sort of community type podcast for women to come and listen and feel safe to have conversations about anything women want to talk about. And I think in the early days we were probably all just winging it, you know? And then the more we would talk about, so the first few times that we would sort of like, oh my God, we're talking about our sex lives out loud, or penises, or career, you know, really scary career stuff, or anything. The more we sort of opened up, people just were loving it. And it just sort of grew and grew and grew, and has become a pretty amazing product that we're all really, really proud of. Because it is for us now a place where we want women to feel safe and comfortable and be able to have those conversations that for many, many years and centuries women haven't had. So we love it. It's you know, for sometimes it's our own form of therapy for ourselves, but we know that it helps a lot of women out there.
I had a podcast last week with Kimberly Crossman, and
she's fantastic.
Yeah, and she does a podcast, and she does it in America, of course, because she's working with various people like, you know, Stephen Fry, and she gets to have some interesting guests on, but it's really based around mental health and her mental health issues and stuff she's worked through. But then that's the subject matter that she often talks to these, you know, Hollywood actors and actresses and people about. So again, it's like a cathartic conversation she has for herself, but also it seems so many people are finding, can you say catharticism? Whatever. They're finding, other people are finding cathartic as well. So yeah, I get it.
Which is great.
Yeah. And that's the thing that's so lovely is as you say, you can find a podcast on blowflies. I should Google it. There probably is one. Because you can really go niche, and then you find exactly what you want. The other thing that's great about podcasts, or even it feels a bit similar. You know how Netflix will do like a short run documentary series, like 4 parts. Same sort of thing as you can then find something that's a short series, like Black Hands, which is the David Bain one that I think RNZ put out.
I still haven't done that, but I need to. But
sort of a short form topical conversation that is too hard to fit into a, you know, an hour-long radio program or a you know 3,000 word essay. So they make a 10-part series, and that's kind of cool as well. Yeah. So it's I think New Zealand's a little bit behind on how we handle podcasts. I think the American market and the American model is moving, and I think unfortunately for us, and maybe because we're a small marketplace, both the advertisers don't quite understand it yet, and those who are selling the advertising are trying to hold on to the grasp they've got for their small market. And when people figure out that this is a much more effective way of getting your message across, then I think that's where we'll find a whole bunch of people doing this and being able to do it as a full-time gig, which will be amazing.
Yeah, bring it on. I say bring it on.
Yes.
I think that's always quite a. I mean, I can say that it's a sweet little New Zealand thing, but I'm like, okay, come on, let's catch up now. Let's go. But we sometimes are a little bit behind the eight ball. But I mean, gosh, people are listening to podcasts. People are listening in their cars. Like people, are working out at the gym, going running, and it is amazing how many people love it. And what I think I like about it as well is the time that you have. So it just is such a relaxed space already because there's no rush.
Totally.
And,
totally.
Like with my another one that I started recently, Kiwi Yarns, it's like instead of someone rushing into a studio, plonking them on a seat, hey, tell me about your book in about 30 seconds. Thank you, cool, nice, see you later. Or, clipping up the best 15-second audio grab of someone's got an hour to tell you, or however long to tell you about themselves. And I love sitting down with people in any podcast or no podcast over a beer or whatever. That's why I love doing what I do so much, is just people just sitting and feeling comfortable and talking about their life and how they got to where they are and any of that stuff. And that's what I love, is that I don't know. That and your doco kind of series stuff are places that just can seem to be able to do that so beautifully. And that's what I think is so good about them. Yeah,
no, I often use an example when people kind of go, well, who's your demographic? I kind of go, we're a bit weird because we talk to everyone about everything. So it's sort of people who like interesting conversations. We're not your blowfly kind of podcast. But I say to them, but what you'll get is, and I use Di as an example, hopefully he's okay with me saying this again, but it's the place you come and hear Di Henwood talking for 40 minutes about politics. It's that you don't hear in other places. We had Emily Wrights from Spin-Off, who's known by most people as sort of a parenting expert. We talked to her for 2 hours in Queenstown, and the subject of parenting didn't come up once. And it's funny, exactly. You talk about authors. I try and explain this to people who don't know anything about us by saying, if I've got an author coming in, I say to them very clearly, I'm not interested in interviewing you about your book. I want to talk to you about your life. Now, obviously, the book is a big part of your life, but that's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about your life. It just skews it for a little bit differently to make the way we do it slightly different. And it's always fun. Yeah. And like I said to you before we went live, I don't know what we're going to talk about yet. I guess we'll find out in 30 seconds. And we started with sport. I literally had no idea that was going to be the first thing we talked about. And very, very few of these. There are some of them sometimes. They typically are the more academic ones, or, for example, when I'm talking to flat earthers, because that's always fun. Very few of these I have notes for. I've got some tabs open, like your website and stuff, but I liken this style to my beer fridge is right here, literally. Sitting in the pub on a Friday night. It's 11 o'clock. I've just met this person. We're having a chat over a beer. That's what this podcast is, at least.
It's so good, and sitting there and having a beer with someone is great as well. So I completely agree. I'm sure your aim is so that other people get something out of it, but you equally get something out of it as well. That's what I do. It's like I love doing it. So if you all enjoy it, then that's great.
I've sort of long been of the opinion that if I make something that I like, it'll find a market, it'll find an audience. And that's typically what I've done right through my broadcasting career. Like I did Talkback on ZB overnights, where I followed on from a short-term female host that was there who the audience didn't really like, didn't really work, for whatever reason. As you say, we all have our use-by date, so to speak. And I went on board and kind of started a different show. In fact, I remember I got criticised once in stuff.co.nz, criticised me by saying, it sounds like a daytime talkback show. But I took that as a huge compliment because that's what I wanted to do. You know, I wanted people to tune in, and it wouldn't matter whether it was 2:00 in the afternoon with Danny or 2:00 in the morning with me. I wanted it to be similar in style. That's what I liked, and it found an audience. And eventually, it was the I mean, it was overnight. Still, ZB's a mammoth thing, but it became the biggest overnight radio show out of all the brands and all the people. So it found an audience, and I've kind of just followed that through.
Good.
So let's just hope that continues, though. We're finding an audience.
Well,
that's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
So I also was interested to have a look at your website. Where's your website gone? Have I closed it down? That was dumb of me, wasn't it? What else are you doing? Is there a road trip that's just happened with stuff you've been doing, or what you're actually organising out of your overall? Obviously, you've come out the back of COVID and of the hits and stuff, and you've changed direction a bit like Polly, perhaps, and kind of taken more control of what you're doing. Is Brodie Kane Media a new initiative from there, or is it something that was always running in the background, and you have just kind of started to push it to the forefront because you've got time now?
I'm just going to clarify. I moved my microphone in that to get my face out of the sun, and it made a squeaking noise. So if anyone thought that was a fart, it was my microphone.
It's all right.
Now, no. So I have wanted to, for a few years now, have thought that one day I would quite like to run my own business, or work for myself. I've always thought that would be a dream. And so then when I got made redundant, I spent a lot of time in lockdown thinking, is this the time to do it? And it was like, well, pretty sure there's not going to be a great deal of other jobs floating around for for any time soon. And so I made a decision that I was like, well, why not just start it, build a really cool website that can showcase your talents, and then just start hustling for, and I guess the aim is, as I say, you've got to, your website's essentially a big part of your CV, who you are, what you do.
Your shop front.
And exactly. And I guess really focusing on those non-traditional forms of media, which are growing. So podcast, growing. Social media marketing, growing. Video, YouTube, Vimeo, video content that's not accessed on television, growing. Blogging, vlogging, you can turn your nose up at it. It's here to stay. It's growing. So that's sort of where that was born. And I thought, well, if I can focus on things that I don't work in radio right now. I don't work in television. I don't work in print. So, but I've got skills in areas that I've gathered from those that I can take on to things that I already know how to do and have learned, and I'm still learning, to upskill in those other areas that are growing. So that was the idea. That is the idea. I also want to, in the future as well, take on some more podcasts. So if I want people to, if they want to try one, come and get a bit of training, give it a whirl. If it works, great. Let's chuck it on the books, see how it goes. I've just bought myself a brand new Canon camera so that I can train myself up to be a videographer as well. I just think that I want to be able to do everything. I eventually think that maybe I'll manage some people. This is all big picture, but why not?
Yeah, no, and it's once you get going and you can open the door for other people. Like we've got, I'll show you this. This is actually another part of the studio. So we've got a second setup there. So that's another.
Wow.
That's on the other side of the studio. We've got some people who come in and use that space as well. There's a couple of, same as you, the Rode Pod mics are sitting there on their stands, and so this is like 4 meters away from me over in that direction. So we've set up a similar thing. This is my space and this is where I do my stuff. But we've got another space already set up, and we say to people, if you want to come and give it a go, if you want to come and partner with us, if you want to come and use us as a production house, we can do that for you. And we're making a couple of podcasts for people. One that's a commercial one for a real estate agent. They come in every 2 weeks and talk the Dunedin real estate market, and then they talk a bit of rugby because we live in Dunedin. And I think that kind of opening the door for other people. But also, I like what you're talking about. Training yourself up on a camera. You know, I've got an incredibly gifted and talented technical, I can call him my technical director. We don't really have titles in this, but he basically built my studio and got everything going and trained me to use it. And now we sort of work together to try and find work that we can both do. He's a filmmaker and a videographer. But in this current industry as well, if you can, and climate, if you can do it all yourself as well, then it's like you can keep your nut smaller, you know. You don't have to find $1,000 a day to do X. You can just do it yourself in your own stuff. So yeah, so we're trying to we're doing a similar thing. COVID came and kicked us in the balls a bit and kind of stopped what we were doing, but we were right at the start. We had a different studio. We had a studio in central Dunedin, and we shut that down, and this is now my house where we built the studio downstairs, smaller, but we thought we'd go down and then start again and start to go back out. And yeah, do it yourself, keep your nuts small, and try and live a quality lifestyle with what you're doing. Love what you do and do it as much as you can.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's an interesting year to do it all with COVID and a global pandemic. But then when is a good time? So, you know, people often say to you, if you've got a dream like this and you always have to take risks, you won't tend to do them when you're comfortable. So the best time to do it is when you are uncomfortable. And look, the reality is as well, I mean, I was saying to a couple of people earlier this week, I was like, I will have to find some other work, like at the same time. And that's cool. And I'm not quite sure what that is just yet, but I'm currently exploring that. If it's, mate, I was even thinking about going back and doing lifeguarding over summer just as so that I can do both and that you've got a reliable income coming in to pay those things we like to call mortgages. So, you know, just getting the hustle done. It's great. It's great fun.
It was quite well. I was going to say advertised. That's the wrong way to say it. Publicised is a better word. You know, if you look up Brodie Kane and the first few stories that pop up are about COVID and classic, or the hits and losing work. And did anyone come knocking after that and have opportunities popped up because you have been available for other work?
Well, I guess the good thing is there's sort of more people approaching you about different kind of work, but it's been really tricky because I feel like there was quite a bit of work picking up a little bit, and then Auckland went back into lockdown. Then I think they sort of everything paused for a bit there. But I think it's more in those different realms. So quite a bit with social media, quite a bit with businesses and stuff that focused on products and that still could, companies and that were still operating as per normal. You did quite a bit with them. And so I would hope that I guess it's just such an unknown because everyone's sort of trying to operate as normal as possible, but you don't know if we're going to bung up a level again. So hopefully if we can get down to level 1 and stay there for a period of time, things will pick up again. Well,
hopefully the government's got their A into G. And I say that actually with a great deal of respect and thankfulness for the work we did in the first lockdown. But it feels like that this COVID situation has been a mixture of good governance and good luck. The good governance has been the decisions made around, the first lockdown. The good luck has been, it would appear that there's been some balls up at the border, not testing the people working at the border enough, yet still without doing that, it hasn't decimated the community again. That would be the good luck. So I think we've got a foot in both camp of good governance and good luck, but hopefully this latest kind of lockdown in Auckland, semi-lockdown, 2.5, whatever they call it. And it was just announced today for anyone who's watching us live that we're staying in 2.5 for Auckland and 2 for the rest of the country, probably for another 2 weeks. Hopefully that's the kick in the arse to go, now when we go to level 1, let's say, fingers crossed, in 2 weeks, the border will, the airports will still stay at level 3, whatever they have to ensure it stays as much as possible in the facilities and not in the community. Hopefully, fingers crossed.
Yeah. That's the thing. I think as much as like level 2, if we need level 2 for another couple of weeks to just really make sure we've got that shit locked down, and then, because no one wants to go back into one of those levels in summer.
Oh my God.
I know that people are doing it tough, but we've just got to, everyone's got to get used to wearing masks. We've just got to actually realise that this, unfortunately, is going to be part of our lives for some time. So it's not going to end at the end of the year. It's not going to, it's not going to be like, right, everyone, don't worry, we're going to be in masks for a long time. The things are going to change forever.
Yeah. I think you're right. I had this conversation just yesterday with somebody. It's like, I've got friends who are in Japan and parts of Asia who have been living with masks for decades. And I've got a friend in Japan, and she moved to Japan in the late 90s. She's half Kiwi, half Japan. And she was like, masks are common over there. And every time she goes on a plane, she wears a mask. I think you'll see that kind of stuff now in the community in the world. Like, I can imagine, and let's say in 3 years from now, this is all wrapped up and over, and we've got a vaccine and it's not in the community. I can imagine still comfortably seeing people in masks sitting in airplanes, going from Wellington to Auckland or whatever. I imagine it'll stay with us.
When you actually think about it, planes, you're sitting in close contact with strangers, air conditioning is circulating around the plane. Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm like, actually, and I know that there's some like preliminary stats, and there are lots of other parts of the health system where the numbers are quite low because people, the normal flu rates and pneumonia things, and that some of them are quite anecdotally quite low because people are being a lot more hygienic and actually looking after themselves and staying at home when they're sick with us. So we're probably all really healthy at the moment. For doing these extra things and washing our hands 30 times a day and sanitizing, there's some lessons to be learned. I mean, it's been a hard bloody road learning them, but
I'm just looking up as you're talking, because there's been some pretty clear indicators around the world that we being, I guess, the species that is human, the deaths are actually down all over the world for that exact reason. We've got the COVID deaths obviously going through the roof, which we haven't had before, but actual deaths are down because of that exact thing. I mean, you think about, this is a horrible one to think about America, but I don't want to say this ignorantly and then go, well, there was one yesterday, but when was the last time you heard about a mass shooting in America? And I feel that there hasn't been any massive ones this year because people have been locked up and locked away, and there hasn't been the big events, and there's not as many deaths on the road because people aren't out and about. And as you say, I'm not shaking hands with someone and then going to visit an elderly person in a rest home and taking it with me, knocking out 3 of the retirement villages. So yeah, it's if this part of what we're learning can continue on, we are healthier now, and we will all remain healthier for the foreseeable future, which would be amazing.
Exactly. I've sort of been, I haven't been bragging about it, but I haven't been even remotely, touch wood, remotely sick this year. Not even a cough. I haven't had to have that thing up my nose. I haven't even been at even 1 ounce of sick this year.
Yeah, no, I got a little bit of there was a bit of a cold going around Dunedin, and it was in level 1. So no one was too worried about it. I said this before, the case of I think it was a lady, but I'm not sure. But anyway, the person who was in the cluster in Auckland who travelled to Rotorua, and they had some symptoms. And I was like, well, dude, I had symptoms last week of a cold, but we were in level 1, which means it wasn't in the community. So I didn't think twice about it. And probably if I had an opportunity to go to Wanaka or, whatever, I would have gone, I've got a bit of a cold, but it's just a cold. I know it's just a cold because it's not in the community. So I get it. I get why she or he went, because it wasn't in the community. Little did she know or he know that they were the people in the community with it. So I get it. So I've had a bit of a cold that went around Dunedin, but we all knew straight away it was a cold because it wasn't here. And
don't you think this time around we've learnt that actually just because a level goes down doesn't mean our level of complacency should go down? And I think that's what I've learned. Definitely what happened with second round of Auckland lockdown. It's like, mate, if you're sick, it's just like stay at home. Because there's so much. I think we all went level 1. Woo!
Yeah.
And then it was like, oh shit! Look how quickly it can turn.
Yeah. And I think what would happen is, let's say we go to level 1 in 2 weeks from now, and then I got that same cold again. I would go and get tested. So I put my hand up and say, I was correct. Now, whether that was once again my own personal good governance or good luck, maybe it was good luck. But if that's what I've learnt. if I would do it again. And like, even though we're level 2 in Dunedin, as you guys are in Christchurch, there's not too much to worry about when it comes to concern about the person next to me in the supermarket having COVID. But I'm still now going, not that I'd stop doing this, but I've got alcohol rub in the car and washing hands. First thing the kids do when they come back from school, wash your hands. Those are the kinds of things that if we choose to keep those on in our families and our communities, things like the flu and that kind of stuff numbers will go down dramatically. I mean, during that first lockdown, whatever it was, 5.5 weeks, I mean, it's probably fair to say that probably by the end of it, the flu wasn't in New Zealand, probably, because it'll have been through its cycle and everyone was inside.
Yeah. Well, funny thing is that one thing I do quite like about level 2 is, now don't get me wrong, I love people and I love hugging and personal connection and that, but I do like the 2 metre gaps. Like, I hate when you're lining up somewhere at the petrol station or something and someone's breathing over your neck, or like, you're at the airport and everyone's around the baggage carousel and everyone's all I'm like, no, could we keep all those stickers on the ground maybe when this all goes back to normal, and just keep those? Can we all line up like that? That might be quite nice.
Yeah, I was just trying to look up that thing still about death rates, but of course what's happening at the moment, I'm just getting lists and lists and lists of coronavirus death rates, so we'll leave it at that. And look, we're going to go to level 1, and it was pretty cool, although it was pretty cool when we were like watching that Super Rugby Aotearoa with 40,000 people at Eden Park and 30,000 people down here at Frosty Boy Stadium, and various, but it was a good party and a good time. And I think all that we need to do differently next time is be more mindful of the crowds who we're sitting next to and how we're looking after ourselves, and that can come back. Now, what it might have to mean is not 40,000 at Eden Park, maybe 25,000, with a bit more kind of distance between people, or at the cricket or whatever. But that can come back again. And when you do feel sick under level 1, you don't do what I did and go, yeah, I'm fine. You go, well, I'm probably fine, but I need to get checked anyway. There's just that little addendum on the end, I mean, it's not in the community, I'm probably fine, but for the safety of everybody, this whole team of 5 million we keep hearing about, I'll go get checked.
Totally. I think it's not that hard. It's actually not that hard.
Yeah. Have you had that thing up your nose at all yet, for any reason?
No, because again, I haven't had any reason to.
What do you think about the asymptomatic situation, though? I mean, because that's
very. I tell you why that's scary. Is I remember when the announcement was made on that Monday for us to go into lockdown. Remember how quickly that all happened?
Yeah.
And I had been in Auckland, so I'd gone up to Auckland which was already a planned trip, and I was supposed to actually, Kelly Slater was supposed to be at Piha surfing, god damn it, and then that didn't happen, and I was going to meet him, and anyway, so I'd still decided to go up, and I think that we still, even at that point, which was, we went out for dinner to bloody Prego, and I will be the first to admit that I was, I was behaving probably in a reckless manner. But, we were drinking it round at a mate's place and stuff like that. And it wasn't actually till I got home on the Saturday before the Monday announcement and the Prime Minister did that address in her office, which, is a big deal. And I started to feel terrible because I saw a meme that was like, a meme, because that's serious news. But this was actually quite a good meme, and it said, if you had to retrace your steps over the past 14 days, would you be embarrassed? And I went, I couldn't even, yes.
Yeah.
And so I was back in Christchurch, I'd been on a plane, and I started to feel horrific about that. And as then we got into lockdown, and I was like, oh my God. And I kid you not, for the 14 days, I felt like a shit person. I was in lockdown with Mum, but my dad is in his late 70s, so he had to stay home. So I did his groceries and that, but it was just so weird. I was like, there's no way for these 2 weeks that I'm going anywhere near him.
Yeah.
And so, that weird thing of dropping the supermarket bags at the end of the driveway, but I felt terrible, and I was like, you could be one of those asymptomatic people, and I was just very, very aware of that, and I felt like a shit person.
Yeah. And
I think we should all remind ourselves of that, especially I mean, I know that young people have got really sick from COVID and that as well, but, you know, a lot of asymptomatic people are younger and healthy people. So I always think that that's really scary because heaps of people are in that position.
Yeah, and look, when we were about to go into that big lockdown, there was fucking 200 university students had a party here. I was ropeable, like just prior to that, like on the Tuesday night or something, they all decided they'd have a party, and I was like, "What you?" And it's like university did really well. I think their messaging was "look after your gran and pop," and I thought that was great messaging. You know, like think of mum and dad or gran and pop back at home, sort of thing. But I think that's also why, this whole kind of being blasé a bit about it, I think we became a bit comfortable about it because it was always going to come back into the community. It's impossible not to. You know, someone at the border is going to get infected by someone who is asymptomatic who's going to take it back to their family. And the Prime Minister always said that, but I think we all kind of went, we're fine now. But now I think it's going, when we get to level 1, at some stage this will still be back in the community, and that'll hopefully be the little wake-up call for the continuing on with what we need to do. It's almost like we gave all the responsibility to those at the borders and those at the isolations and absolved ourselves of responsibility when we were in level 1. But I think what this has done is gone, okay, we still have responsibility. You know, we've still got stuff we got to do.
I don't think that I mean, yeah, I you know, okay, government decisions and that ultimately, and yes, there was some definitely issues, and you know, not a lot of us weren't aware that those officials and that at the border and that weren't getting tested, and I know that I learned about that as well in terms of you can't just force people into tests, and I know that there was some really some law changes that had to happen, and so that you could be like, well, you work at the border, you to get tested because it's against the bloody Geneva Convention or whatever. But I often, that's a point that I make to people, and I'm like, hang on a minute, a government can do so much, but what about the person? What about individual responsibility? You know, and this is shit. It is shit. We're in a global pandemic. This is part of a big, massive part of history. And so, but then I also go, if you just wash your bloody hands and put your mask on when you're on your public transport and scan your bloody app and just, I know that we all love our freedom, but just do as you're bloody told with some simple tasks. It's not the end of the world, and then you will have your freedoms. You know, like just... It's not that hard. You're not being asked to go to war as a 17-year-old boy, and you're just being asked to do some simple things. And if you think that that's taking away your privileges, well, then just get over yourself. Ooh. Yeah.
So hang on, I'm just gonna bring that pulpit back over here this side for a little while, just to get myself back comfortable. I think you're 100%. I think you're 100% right, and I think not to get all political and stuff as we come towards the end of this podcast, but that's one of the problems you see in America. You know, America is like, my rights, my freedom. You can't tell me what to do, and that's the whole economy, the whole country has been set up on my freedoms as an American. I'll do what I want, and the government says do this, and they go, fuck off. I'm an American. No, small government. I don't do what you say. I do what I want. And I think that's a part of the when I say the problem, it's like, if you choose that, so be it. If you're Sweden and you want tenfold of your old people to die and get no financial GDP benefit from it whatsoever, you can make that decision and you can go with it. If you're American, you can make that decision and go with it. But that's the reality of it. You know, my freedoms, me, individualism. They call it exceptionalism, and that's the reason they've got, I'm assuming it's 190,000 dead by now, and more to come.
The funny thing is about that as well, I mean, there is a lot of that talk about freedoms and, these lockdowns and army, people, police checkpoints, and what is this country becoming? It's this draconian state. And I'm like, okay, guys, let's all take a deep breath. This is not something that happens every year.
Yeah.
There are ways that we're dealing with it. It is pretty weird. But ultimately, why... We do have to have rules in the world, because when there are stricter rules than we're used to, that's when those oh my God, where are our freedoms heighten when it's like, hey mate, have you seen the movie The Purge, where they give people 48 hours with no rules and what happens? Rules are needed. I'm sorry for calling it, we need rules. We need to play by some. So to live in a safe environment.
I'm actually just thinking from our previous conversations, maybe you could fill in for Hosking after that rant. Maybe it would be quite a good thing you could do. You could jump in there.
Yeah, well, I mean, I never short of a conversation, Pat. So someone gives me a microphone, I'll talk.
Hey, Brodie, if people want to know more about what you're up to, what you're doing at the moment, where you're at, your website is brodieKanemedia.com.
Yes, that's the one.
And that's the best place to go to find everything?
Yeah, well, it's got my video content. I do a bit of writing, and that's where you can go to read about or find out more about the podcasts, the Girls Uninterrupted and Kiwi Yarns. And then if you want to see what I'm up to every day, just go on to Instagram at Brodie Jean Kane, and that's sort of like an unfiltered access to daily mundane life, going for runs, taking the dog for a walk, having a rant, whatever. Jean, eh?
Jean is the middle one, eh? How do you feel about that?
Yes, it is.
You're loving that? That sounds like a bit of a yester. My middle name is Bede, so there's no criticism from me. B-E-D-E is my middle name. So they're kind of names of yesteryear a little bit. Don't hear me.
Yeah, that was my grandma's name.
Yeah, you don't hear too many baby Jeans these days, do you? Although that sounds quite cool, baby Jean. That's quite a cool name, actually.
Baby Jean does sound cool.
It's not so bad. Hey, mate.
I like that.
Loving the conversation, and unfortunately, we're gonna wrap it up now because I've got one of those horrible little children thing that I have to go take care of, little bastards. So I'm gonna go and do that. But it would be cool again to catch up again. And one of the things I do love about this sort of thing, so different from, as we've talked about, the mainstream media or whatever you want to call it, commercial media, is that, if we want to talk again in a few weeks' time, we can, because no one's stopping us. And we can just continue on.
That's quite right. It's quite a good point you make there. Exactly. It's like, what are you doing today? Oh, I've got a bit of time.
Yeah. Brodie Kane, you're a wonderful person and a legendary person. And thank you for joining us today. And we'll talk again sometime soon.
Thank you, Pat. Great to talk to you.